Alright, hello once again, this is Jeff Scott. I've been going over HTML5 and CSS3 using the Murox HTML5 and CSS3 third edition textbook. I'm in Chapter 4, which is how to use CSS to format the elements of a web page. Now, as we start, one thing to kind of throw out at you. When you work on a website, what you want to do as much as you can is you want what's called a separation of concerns. What I mean is this. Ideally, you'll take all of your HTML, all of your hypertext markup language, and you'll put all of your HTML in a file with a .html extension. Okay. Then you will take your presentation, your stuff to make stuff different colors and different fonts and font sizes, etc. That's all your cascading style sheet stuff. So you'll put that in its own file, which will have a .css extension. And you will link that file using a link tag in your HTML. Finally, you'll have kind of a logic that makes stuff happen. It makes your site interactive, etc. And that will be done with JavaScript, which again should be kept in its own file that has a .js extension. So ideally, if you had a simple website that had just one page, you would have three files: an index.html file, something like a styles.js file, and then, like a styles.css file, and then some kind of a JS or JavaScript file, whatever you decided to call it. So just keep that in mind as we get started here, because that's what you'd want to do. So, our objectives here: give it an HTML document, create a CSS style sheet for formatting the web page, and we'll look at that. Give it an HTML document with one or more CSS style sheets applied to it. Use the developer tools for your browser to inspect the styles. Give it a selector in the CSS for an HTML document. Describe what the selector applies to. Describe 3 ways to include CSS in a web page. Explain why it is usually best to use an external style sheet for formatting a page. Kind of just did that. Describe the changes you need to make to the HTML and CSS files if you want to use CSS to format the HTML5 semantic elements in versions of IE before version 9. Typically that's referred to as an HTML shiv. You'll see it a little later. Describe the purpose of the normalized.css style sheet. Distinguish between absolute and relative units of measurement. Describe 3 ways to specify color in CSS, and I've done those in earlier lectures, but we'll go through it again. And describe how CSS3 expands on that. Describe universal selectors, type selectors, ID selectors, class selectors, descendant selectors, child selectors, sibling selectors, pseudo class selectors, and pseudo element selectors. Describe one accessibility guideline for using pseudo class selectors, and explain how user style sheets with the exclamation point important rules can be used to basically change the normal order of things. Describe font family, font style, font weight, font size, and line height. And describe text indent, text align, text decoration, and text shadow. Now, before we get started, I wanted to look for something, at something. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pause because I'm in my basement, and what I want to look for is upstairs, but I wanted to show you something, and I think it's going to be worth your while to see this. So I'm going to pause the video now. Alright, what I was looking for were a couple of presentations that I had created earlier for a different class, but I think they're very relevant in here. So what I'm going to do, and these are all my creations, so love them or hate them, it doesn't matter, but this says 152, 119 slideshow for that. Not even do that. Let's just say 152, 157, presentation number 1. Okay? And I'm not going to take the time right now to go over each and every one of these, but just so you see it. A little bit of history of HTML5, the goal of it, how you should write a basic HTML5 template with a couple of variations. You notice that's hyperlinked. Thing on doc types, what the HTML lang is, what the head section is, on this HTML5 shiv, which we'll talk about in just a minute, why you should follow standards, a very important site that's called caniuse.com. All right, and we'll get into that in just a minute. This is an online book that's called Dive into HTML5, and it's just a really, really nice textbook. What you should do and not do with HTML5, recommendations, semantics. What does semantics mean? More stuff about semantics. This right here, these are all links, and I believe they're links to that HTML5 doctor, but I could be wrong. So information on all those major tags that we have already talked about: header, section, article, nav, aside, and footer. All right, and this is a real life example, so I'm not going to go through that right now. I'm just going to save this. And so that was called 152, 157 presentation number 1. So there's the first one. Then the second one is here, about the same size as the first one, but it'll be presentation number 2. All right. And when you look in here, here's the differences between block and inline. All right, title, link, etc. Some of the stuff that's in there. Much of the stuff we talked about in the previous chapter. All right. A little bit about the Mozilla Developer Network, Fig and Fig Caption, Mark. So these are some of the new tags in HTML5. All right. Some of the changes in HTML5. The validator, a little bit on forms. All right, don't worry about this next class stuff because it was for a different class. But the last one, there's 3 presentations and this is the last one. So I do want to mention this to you. This one has got 100 slides. So it's not like you're going to sit there and finish it in a minute or two. But what I've done in there is I go over each of the major CSS selectors. And this was what I used for my my reference. All right? And each one is in here. So in other words, there'll be one of these will be explained, then there'll be an example, explanation, example, etc. And the whole thing is just that. When you get to a certain point, we'll talk about them and I'll reference an example. We'll talk about them and I'll reference an example. So you should be in really, really good shape with all of that stuff in there to be able to go and understand what's going on here, in my opinion. All right, hopefully you agree with that. So I'm going to grab this and I think I'm just going to literally throw it in there. Copy it there. All right, so with that said, then let's jump into the chapter. There are 3 ways that you can provide style sheets. You can have an external style sheet, again, which is what I recommend. All right, because that's separation of concerns that I mentioned before, and then you link it to your web page like this. You can embed the styles in the head section by putting stuff within style tags. And all the CSS file is it's a separate file where you pull out the word style and the word in the slash style, but you keep everything else in there. That's all it is. And this is called that's typically called external, internal, and inline. So typically when you use it, so for instance in here we just want to make this Valley Town Hall 5 times its regular size in red, for example. The sequence in which styles are applied, all right, it goes actually, you would think it would go in the other order, but what it says is if I've got an external style sheet and I've got it embedded styles with a styles tag and I've got inline styles, the inline styles must take precedence. Because if they didn't, then why would you ever have inline styles? All right. So it's called cascading because it cascades down. If I have this, and let's say that I change an H1 tag in here, and I also change H1 tag in here, and I change H1 tag in here. Well, it cascades down, so that one will be the one that takes effect. All right. So here's an example. You can have several style sheets if you want them or need them. This is called the HTML5 shiv, S-H-I-V as in victory. And it's for earlier versions of IE. All right? And the reason that you put it in there is if earlier versions of IE, like IE7 and IE8, if they encounter HTML5 tags that they don't understand, basically it will typically just ignore them. And that's what this will do. All right, so there you go. All right. Normalized.css. Let's take a look at that file and literally just see what that file is. So I don't know if I can click on the link or not. It doesn't look like it, so let's do this. Normalized CSS. Make browsers render all things more consistently. So this is the file, normalized.css. Makes browsers render all elements more consistently and in line with modern standards. So you can download it. If I do download it, there's the whole file. All right. I will file, save as. And again, I will come over here to my classes, which is my P drive. Come down here, find CIS 152, 157, fall 2016, and I'm just going to save it right there. Normalized CSS. So you've got that. And they give you a little text, etc. with this stuff too, if we look at it. Once you save the normalized.css file in a website, you can code a link element to it for each page. This element must be coded before the links for the other style elements. It's a style sheet that makes minor adjustments to browser defaults so that all browsers render HTML elements in the same way. All right? I'm not going to say another thing about it for now. Now, I do want to say one thing. I'm going to give you a name and a guy you may or may not have ever heard of. The guy's name is Eric Meyer. And he's kind of one of the innovators, one of the people involved, I think, from the beginning with CSS. He's created a file that's called reset.css. And this is it right here. So I'm going to grab this whole file. That's it. Copy it to the clipboard. And I'm going to paste it in. All right, I'm not going to do any formatting of it. But what it says is grab, this is most every tag that you have in HTML. Not everyone, but most everyone. It's saying remove any margin you have, any padding, any border, make the font size 100%, etc. So what you're doing, if you do that, is you're starting with a clean slate. And if you go, I don't understand at all what you're talking about, Jeff, I'm going to try to show you right now. First, I'm going to save this twice. I'm going to save this here, and I'm just going to call it reset.css. In fact, I'll just save it once, right there. And then I'm going to close it. Now, I'm going to create a new, very, very small web page with hardly anything on it. Again, I'm not worried about the meta tags, etc. So it's just going to be down and dirty. All right. In fact, what well, I could do that. I'm not going to though. Let's see. If I went back. If I went back to the index.html file that I used back for the last chapter in chapter 3, I think I'll do that because it'll just save me some typing time. So I'm going to go back here to here and chapter 3, and I'm going to open up my index.html file. And I'm going to grab a bunch of this stuff. I don't care so much about those H tags, but I'll grab everything else. Okay? You'll remember it as soon as you see it if you don't remember it right now. So copy that. And then I'm going to come in here and come back to this file and just paste that in right here. Okay, now I've got to remove the comments, but you'll catch on real fast. Okay, so let me remove all these comments. Again, you might go, what? I don't have a clue as to what you're doing, Jeff. Ideally, whoops, you will in just a minute. I think I've removed all those comments that were in there. Alright, so I'm going to save this to my, in fact, let's make another folder in here. We'll call it Ch04. Chapter 04. And as always, we'll call this index.html. Okay? Again, it's not going to be a pretty page, but then let's run it. The reason I'm doing that, and what I'm trying to show you right here, just so you see it, I guess I could have left those H tags in, but just so you see this, what I want you to understand out of this is the fact that there's already been some CSS that's been applied to this by the default by the browser. And I'm looking at this and I'm wondering, oh, see, I didn't remove everything. Okay, so let's save it again and try it one more time. That's a little better. That's got enough stuff in it. All right. So what I'm telling you is there's already been some stuff that's been put in here. How do I know that? I'm going to show you how I know that right now. I'm going to go back to the P drive, all right, where we put that file. Where I thought we put it here, and I guess we didn't. That's not good. Oh, I think we did it on the, just to the desktop. So I'm going to grab that reset.css file. There it is. And I'm going to drag it. I don't want to drag it there. I want to drag it into my Chapter 4 folder. So there it is. Boom. Moving it there. Now I'm going to link it in. It doesn't exist anymore. Yeah, I can get rid of it to keep it in the other. No, it's okay. Okay, so now I want to come back up here, and you saw what it looked like. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to do this. I'm going to say link rel equals style sheet. href equals reset.css. Okay, so now I've added the reset style sheet. Why? Well, you see what it looks like now. Now watch what happens when I reset everything. Okay? That is a style sheet. I'm sorry, that is a web page with no styling on it whatsoever. So you can see there's natural styling that gets put in by the browser. All right, that's what I'm trying to get across to you, because there's a lot of difference between the first iteration of this and this iteration. Okay? All right, let's continue on then. All right, units of measure, these are some of the common ones. A pixel is a single dot on a monitor. All right, for instance, most people tend to type, I tend to, when I do most of my typing, it's 12-point Arial font and it's 12 pixels. Some people use points, where a point is a 72nd of an inch. Some use ems. Some use percentages. All right. What's nice about the examples in here is they give you examples of working with all of them. You can see that right here. Okay. So this is CSS, as it says, that uses relative units of measure. And you're not tethered to any one. You can use ems and pixels, ems and points, pixels and points, whatever you want to do. Percentages. All right. Specifying colors. I've shown you this before, but I'm going to say it again. There are a lot of built-in colors that you can use here. So when you say color colon, it'll put that in. Remember, if you just say color like this is the text color. Or you can use the word RGB, which stands for red, green, blue. And the values that you put inside of here, you can use either percentages, as it says, or, I've never used percentages. I use numbers between 0 and 255. 255 is 100%. 102 is 40%, 51 is 20%, etc. Or you can use what are called the hex triplets, like this. So there's many ways that you can go and you can add color if you want to do that. Here are the colors that you get by default, and I think there are more than this also. All right. Because I've tried tan, etc., and a few other ones, and I know there's a bunch of them that the system just realizes. So here's examples. Now notice this. Notice here it just says #00F. That's a shortcut. So if you wanted to say 0000FF, you could instead, because the second number is always the same as the first number, you can put it as either #0000FF or just #00F. Okay. And as they show it here, this could have also been as FFC. That's what you get out of it. So why are we doing all this stuff? All right, we're doing it because people like it when websites pop. The problem is and it's not a problem, but as it says here on the, as you can see right here on the example, remember, visually impaired people, dark text on a light background is easier to read. And black type on white is the easiest to read, especially for someone who's colorblind. All right, so different ways that you can put in CSS colors. You can also add what's called an opacity value or an alpha value in there. So when you have an RGB A, that's what the A is for. And if you don't know what opacity is, if if something is got 100, opacity is a number between 0 and 1. So if the opacity is 1, it's totally opaque. You can see it all. If the opacity is 0, it's transparent, so you can't see it. There's also hue, saturation, and lightness. You'll learn more about these as you start playing with them. All right, so here are some examples. And we realize, too, that the colors may not resonate exactly the same way in every browser. That's to be expected, because different browsers do handle this stuff differently. All right. CSS rules. Here are some. All right. Again, all this stuff, you can have this. This asterisk means everything. So this means by default everything should have a margin where the top and bottom is 0.5 em and the right and left margin is 1 em. This says anything in your main section should have this. Any H1 tag should have this. Any P tag should have this. This says any ID of copyright should have this. Any class of blue should have this. Any class of right should have this. So you can set CSS by element type, all right, by ID, and by class. And here's where it starts to get at least a little bit hinky and heavy, etc. So I'm going to go back to my book here. We talked about external style sheets. We talked about embedded styles, which I call internal styles, and inline styles. So we talked about those already. We talked about if you want, you can use the normalize .css file. I also showed you the Eric Meyer reset.css file, and there are other reset.css files you can use. If you want to use an absolute measurement, you use pixels or points. If you want to use a relative measurement, you use ems and percents. We looked at the different ways that you can add colors. And that brings us here to some of these selectors. All right. You can code a selector for all elements with a universal selector. That was the last slide. So that again was that asterisk. I guess about 3 slides back. You can code a selector for elements of a certain type by naming the type, and that's called a type selector. You can use an ID, and you can use a class name. All right. Now, I've put notes of my own in the book here, and my note right here, you might laugh, or maybe not, when you see this, but my note actually says right here, go over this lightly, okay? Because you have to look at it before it'll make any sense. All right? So look at the decedent thing that's in there. Okay, this says, I believe, an LI that's inside of a main. This says an A that's inside of a UL. All right. This says an H2 and a P tag that are at the same level. Okay. This says P, and I believe that that's P is a child of main, etc. So there's a bunch of different ways that you can put this stuff. This is only going to start making sense when you take the time to create a simple sheet. And I should show you this too, because when I think of things, I like to throw them out at you. So one thing I thought of, and I may have shown you this before, I don't remember. Let's assume for a second that I want to create a website. So I want to create a brand new website here. I'm just going to grab this stuff, so I've got my beginning junk in here. And I'm not going to worry about the reset. I'm going to remove that line. So I've got this stuff, and for right now, I'm not going to worry at all about having any kind of really. I don't care right now about any kind of CSS. Just for right now. All right. So let's say that what I want to do is in this body, I want to insert about 6 paragraphs. I don't care what they are, but just for filler. I can go out to a site that's called Lipsum, LIPSUM.org. I think it is. That's it. And lorem ipsum is just kind of garbage text. So if I come down here and it says, well, how many paragraphs do you want? And I say 6. And I say, now generate it for me. It gives me 6 paragraphs. So I can grab those 6 paragraphs that are right here. Now when I paste them in, they're going to look pretty ugly. Okay? But I can come up to each one of these paragraphs, and before each one, again, I'm not concerned right now about formatting them and making them look pretty or anything like that. So that's before Chapter 1, Chapter 2, or I'm sorry, Paragraph 2, Paragraph 3, oopsie, Paragraph 4, Paragraph 5, Paragraph 6. Okay, so I've got my paragraph begin tags. Now I need my end tags. There's the end of the end of paragraph 1, the end of paragraph 2, end of paragraph 3, end of paragraph 4, end of paragraph 5, and end of paragraph 6. So why did I show you that? Okay, I'm going to save this again as junk.html, just so there's something in there. All right, and then I'm going to run it. Because now I've got a website with 6 paragraphs worth of text in it. So going out to lipsum.com, and there's different derivations of it out there, can help if you just need a bunch of filler text for your page. Okay? All right. Again, you're going to learn this kind of stuff by starting a new document and playing with it. Okay? This says any UL that has a class of speakers do this. This says for all H1 tags, all H2 tags, and all H3 tags do this. This says for all paragraphs and for all LIs that are part of an unordered list, remember that's list items, as part of an unordered list with a class of speakers. So there's so many different ways that you can use this stuff in here. I can't say it too much. All right? All these attribute selectors. And again, as I mentioned to you previously, all right, as I mentioned to you previously, I've got that third PowerPoint thing, and that's out there on the system now. Take a look at it. There's just so much stuff in it. All right, pseudo classes. These are for hyperlinks. So the link is for a link that hasn't been visited yet. By default, that's blue, but you could change it to any color you want. Visited by default is purple. That means it's a link that's been visited. Active is a link that the mouse button is down on, but you haven't released it yet. And by default, that's red. Hover is when you hover over an element, and focus is whatever element has the focus. Now, those aren't too bad. Some of these start to get a little hinky. First child, the first child of an element. Last child, the last child of an element. All right? Only child, the only child of an element. So why would you want to use anything like this? What if I decided that what I wanted to do, in fact, I think there's an example here. Here's first letter for the first letter of the element, and first line for the first line of the element. But take a look at what's here. All right, this is just a main section in here. Nothing really big. All right, but if you notice, we've got some hrefs and some other stuff. So then they said they're going to take this and they're going to add this CSS to it. Now let's look at what the CSS is doing. This is saying now that when I have links that have not yet been clicked, I want them to be green. Anything that I'm hovering over, I want it to be fuchsia. I want the first paragraph that's here, that paragraph that says, "Welcome to San Joaquin Valley Town Hall," I want that to be bold. I want the first letter in the first paragraph to be, so that W to be 1.5 times its regular size. So let's try that and see if it works. So I'm going to grab this, come into here, and we'll use the same one that we used before. All right, I don't think we need this, all of this junk in here anymore. So we've got all that stuff. We've got our main, our welcome, all of these goodies here. In fact, I'm going to tab each one of these over one more time than they are. I like my paragraphs to be on a line by themselves, and my p tags to each, to be on their own lines. I like doing it like this. Again, that's Jeff's style. If you don't like it, then you should use your style. All right, so I've got all this stuff. So right now, if I save this, and I don't need that p tag there. If I save this, the way that it currently looks, I think it's all finished. I'm looking here, that last UL tag, I'm going to put that down here. All right, let's see what it looks like. This is with no formatting on it whatsoever. Okay? So you can see the color that these are. Notice if I hold down on this, see how it turns red? We talked about that before. If I do click one of these and I come back, well, typically, if there was actually a file there, it would turn purple. But now I'm going to go back. now that we've done this file, I'm going to go back and I'm going to add that CSS that's in the next slide. Okay. And again, I'm just trying to give you good habits from the get-go. And what I mean by that is I'm putting this in its own file. I could pretty this up a lot, make it much easier to read. Again, this is the way Jeff does it. And as mentioned, if you don't like the way I do it, then do it your own way. Come up with your own style, but be consistent. And I've often said, even a bad style is better than no style at all, as long as you stick to it. All right, I'm going to save this now. I'm just about finished. And I'm going to literally call it styles.css. Okay, so let's save this. Do I have one already? No, I don't. So, styles.css. All right, so there it is. I want you to know something. I can go back to this file right here, and now did I put it in the same place? File, save as. There's styles, there's reset, there's junk. Good, it's there. All right. If I want to, I can go and link in. So I'm going to link here rel equals style sheet, href equals reset, reset dot css. All right, and I need an equal sign there. Okay, so I've got that in. What does that do? Well, you already saw that. That takes that and converts it to this. Pretty ugly. As long as I put that reset file first, though, that's totally fine. A lot of developers like to do that. Now I'm going to put in my styles. .css. .css. I don't know what I'm doing here. All right. Now, when I refresh, see how it's been changed? All right. You can see the green underlining, etc. that's in here. And you might say, wow, it still doesn't look like it did before. It still looks more like the other one. That's because I removed everything. If I don't need this, I just put it in there to demonstrate it to you. So I can get rid of that just by commenting it out. Okay, and now I'll go back and refresh, and there it is. So you see the green here. When I put my mouse over it, you can see how it turns fuchsia. When I hold down on it, it also stays fuchsia. All right, so there's a lot of different ways. There literally is an unlimited number of ways that you can work with this stuff to make it do different things. So there you go. All right, accessibility guidelines. Apply the same formatting to the hover and the focus pseudocode for any element. That way, those who can't use the mouse will have the same experience as those who can use the mouse. All right? Okay, this important thing. This is in the book on page 143. All right? If you put something in there like this that says important, what you're telling the system to do is you're telling it to supersede, even if highlight has been set someplace else, you want to set it like this. So when two or more rule sets are applied to the same CSS element, CSS uses the order to determine which one applies. Typically, it's the one that was listed last is the one that will apply. If you want to override that, you can use the, typically it's referred to as like @important. Okay, so there's an example. All right, so here's the hierarchy of doing that, but yeah. So they have in here cascading Chrome's developer tools to show the effects of cascading styles. You may or may not have ever heard of Chrome developer tools, but let's bring up this file right here. All right, I think I'm going to have to actually bring that in, which is fine. So let me close this, close that, close that. I shouldn't need any of this stuff open now. I'm going to go over to the P drive. find my source code for Chapter 4. And there's the town hall. That's what I want. So copy this. And then drop it in here. Alright, so this is the town hall page that they have you create in here. Okay? I'm not going to go through any of it. It's a fairly small page, but when we run it, this is what it looks like. Alright? What if we wanted to have a better idea of internally what was going on in here? Alright? I'm in Chrome, but what I'm about to show you, they have equivalents in Firefox and in IE also. Alright, and that is, I'm going to hit, if you look up on the top of your keyboard, you've got a bunch of keys that go from F1 through F12. I'm going to hit the one that says F12. And what it does is it takes my screen and it kind of separates it into two. You can set it up like I've got it here, or you can set it up so that the bottom screen, the other screen goes on the bottom. I'm just like it right here. What I'm showing you right now are what are called Chrome's developer tools. So to turn it on, you press F12. To turn it off, you press F12 again. It toggles. If you want to inspect the style that's been applied to any element, click on the element in the Elements pane. All right, so Elements pane. So if I want to click on something, well, I want to see how that's been styled. All right, I can click on it, and it shows me in here basically what has been set up for it. Now, most modern browsers, again, provide developer tools, and most of them you press the F12 key. One of the primary uses of the developer tools is to inspect the styles that have been applied to an element. All right, and I will tell you, just another thing, because as stuff comes to my mind, I'm gonna tell it to you. A lot of times when I don't know how to do something, I go out to YouTube.com, and let's say that I wanted to learn Chrome developer tools. I'll type in Chrome developer tools, and notice there's a tutorial. Well, that looks like a good place to start. And these are all going to be different tutorials. Some of them are going to be really good. Some of them are not going to be as good. All right, so what I tend to look at is how many views do they have? Well, this is how to create a website or a blog. That's not what I want. Using Chrome developer tools, 24,000 views, all right, 6 months ago. Well, that doesn't sound bad. What Chrome developers could do that's about a half an hour long. That's got about 75,000 views, but it's 3 years old. So, let's see. Here's 4 months ago. Okay? Chrome developer tutorial for beginners, and it's about 11 minutes long.
Chrome developer tools. So this is a quick overview of Chrome developer tools.
You get the idea. Okay? So anything that you can use that might help you. All right? There are so many resources out there. I mean, you literally could just spend all of your time looking at the resources, but then you'd never get anything done. But I just wanted to show you that there's a lot of stuff out there for you to take a look at. All right? So, I told you about the developer tools, the 5 generic font families, as we peruse our way through here, and I'm on page 147. Serif Font is a fonts that are tapered, flared, or have slab stroke ends. All right, Sans Serif Font is a font with plain stroke ends. If you don't know what that means, wait till the next slide. Monospace uses the same width for each character. Cursive looks like you're writing. And Fantasy has decorative styling. So here's examples of each one. The top one is a serif font. The second one is a sans serif font. The third one is a monospace font. The fourth one is a cursive font. And the last one is a fantasy font. So typically when you specify this in here, you put it in as a font family. Now, 2 things about this. First of all, if you want to put in an element that has blank spaces in it, you need to enclose it in single or double quotes like these. And second, this has got a pecking order. So this says, look for an Arial font. If you can't find it, look for a Helvetica font. If you can't find that, use a sans serif. Normally, you'll put a serif or a sans serif on the end when you get done. All right, because virtually every computer has a serif or a sans serif font. Now there's other properties that you can set for fonts also. Notice font size. I can set it to 12 point or 1.5 times what it usually is, or this is the same as 1.5 times. All right, so there's a lot of different ways that I can set this stuff up. Also with fonts, and this is discussed in a later chapter, but just so you know, let's say that you look, if you start going through here and you go to File, no, not to File, you go to Home, and I want to go here, come on, there, and these are all the fonts that are available to you. But let's say that you're creating your own website. You want this to be just a website like no one has ever seen, and you've gone through every font that was in there, and you don't like any of them for what you want to do. Well, if you go out to google.com/fonts, all right, that takes you to what's called Google Fonts. And there are several hundred, as far as I know, extra fonts that are out here that you can download for free. All right, google.com/fonts. All right, let's jump back again into where we were. So again, other properties for the styling of fonts. Font style, okay, font weight where you can bold, etc. Font variant, line height, and these are shown on page 149. So the style is a keyword, the weight is how much boldness you want, the variant is whether small caps will be used, and the line height is literally that. And then there are some examples. Again, one thing I like about this book, and I've said this to you before, like this book or don't like this book, but blame me. You don't have to praise me if you do like it, but if you don't like it, I just lost my, all right, but if for some reason you don't like the book, okay, it's fine. But what I like about it is typically they show you examples like this, and then right afterwards they show you some code. All right, I'm gonna have to see if I can get control of this back again. This is not good. As sometimes happens, it just kicked me out of the virtual desktop where I was working. Don't know why. But I'm going to stop and start up again, so I will make this a two-part presentation.